Um, oh, I can't. Oh wait, Susan, you need to, right? You're the
Yeah,
host? Oh, there we
I'm
go. It's
recording.
already happening. Sorry. Yeah, so I mean, I think that like from my side, there's a number of sort of just like updates and a few maybe like things on I'm not quite sure what the next step is or how to move forward that are a little bit more tactical. And that I think it's no big deal if Kate's not there. Because it's not like a real decision. I think that we could sort of give Ants a bit of a download of what we sort of talked about in Barcelona. Because I think Ants, yeah, we've had this sort of reflection that I think specifically Susan has been feeling really strongly about, which is like we can't have certain conversations without everyone being there. Or is it okay to have it with 2 or with 3 people and to then play it back to the others, or sort of iterate the conversation in even smaller groups, and not have everything with everybody. So I think actually it would be good maybe to establish how we feel about that in general, because it's sort of a reality given our distributedness. So should we maybe do a quick round of any updates that we have that are a bit more tactical, and then sort of figure out, think about what larger topics related to that Barcelona update we might want to chat about now. And I think that specifically, I guess it's just about what happens till February, basically. Or what does it look like when we meet?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to start with this. Fran and I had a conversation about the legal stuff, and I just had a brainwave that I couldn't believe I've forgotten about. That I actually know a lawyer in the UK that specializes in these kind of new work configurations. That was part of the Guincho gathering in Portugal last year. So I've just given that those contact details to Fran. Fran, would you like me to do a specific intro, or are you fine just reaching out to Patrick?
As you like, whatever you think is more effective, I guess.
Yeah, I'll just do a quick intro email today.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Be good.
Yeah, because that was actually one of the things I was going to ask you about, basically.
Yeah,
was this person.
Because
So you think I should? Sorry, go for it.
No, because I was just reflecting on the quote that you'd gotten from that other lawyer, and something about it didn't feel great to me. So I'm glad that came about. So maybe do you want to just fill in, Ants, about what kind of the lawyerly stuff you think we can get done between now and February, and what's important?
Yes. Yeah, so basically, I mean, it's a bit of a follow-up from the update that already was on Slack, which is like my objective was to, in February, be able to arrive together with basically a draft proposal of what we could be stepping into from a legal perspective. So what it means to be a co-owner, and like the legal framework that would take. So basically have a sort of first version of how we want to be a worker-owned business. And so my hope was that when we meet in February, we've already done all the pre-work of like ways that could look, so that we actually have something where we've maybe identified a few key topics that we haven't quite decided on which option we want, and then we just sign on the dotted line. And so from my perspective, like it seemed like quite a bit of work was going to be needed for that to be realistic, that we actually have clear options by February. So that was basically what I went to with this lawyer in London. So it was basically getting mainly 3 things. One thing was having a proper, like, what was it called? A consultancy agreements. Since all of us are going to not be employees, but going to be contractor agreements, to have like some kind of formal document that ensures like what our relationship is to greater than as contractors, and ensures that we can file expenses and all this kind of stuff without having a potential suspicion of being fake employees, which is sometimes an issue. Secondly, a shareholder agreement, and thirdly, the basically an evolution of our constitution, of our bylaws, that basically would have like a proper mission statement and like describe what we're doing as a purpose-driven business. So those 3 pieces, like we had received an original offer for. And basically Susan and I chatted about it in Barcelona, and we were not quite sure about like the price and whether it made sense. So I guess what I would do in this next step would be to reach out to this other person that you thought of, give them the exact same brief, and see what they think. That's sort of the plan. And I guess my suggestion, well, this is basically part of the scope of work to set up greater than that we had talked about, ants, that I was working on an estimate of like, I mean, overall I was thinking like about a day a week until we meet on this, plus some other admin setup stuff. But like, yeah, we didn't quite close the conversation in Barcelona, so I still didn't quite get to my actual financial estimate, unfortunately. So that's that update. Thoughts?
I guess I just wanted to check in with you, Ants, to see if because I felt like I was still until I was in Barcelona, sort of still feeling a little unclear on what the expectation for February was. If your expectation and my expectation was that we were just kind of drifting to see, like, starting some of the work and then coming together in February to discuss next steps, or if it feels good to you that Fran does a bunch of pre-work and then brings a proposal to us in February. I'd like to get your reaction to that.
And maybe just quickly to add, we had said that the pre-work would be facilitating conversations over the next few months, well, 2 months, among us about topics. So not like me just working alone for 3 months and then proposing something, but having the conversations over the next 3 months.
Cool. I think regardless of who is going to be involved, it feels like important, necessary work anyway. So I just think the work to do, to put in, to figure out a scope of work to create base garden bed stuff that you need to operate, I think from my perspective feels really important. If it's like something like a day-ish a week for 12 weeks, at $50 an hour tagged to those, it's six grand. I mean, pick your currency, but like that's sort of something to put in the back of your brain. Like if and somewhere, so maybe it's somewhere between $6,000 and $10,000 is a reasonable amount of brain space that it's going to take to get this sorted. So I would say it's good to have a number or something so we can look at it and go, well, yeah, okay, so let's say it's going to cost 10 grand to set up the shop and have the basics in place, then we're going to pay that back over the next year or two or whatever. That makes sense. I think the consulting, the work to set up good, safe, legal, easy consulting practices is super important, and I think that's probably where in the short term the majority of the action's going to come from. I guess I personally feel a little bit not sure because where I fit, because once the book is out and that opens up all of the stuff, I really want to orientate myself more towards products. And so I think my bias is definitely towards more productized stuff as much as possible. And I think that's more like what Leadwise evolves into, or what sort of comes in that direction, with more of a focus on like selling things that make money on the internet rather than trying to do more chunky, complicated consulting stuff like with the value web and that kind of thing. But at the same time, I see a huge opportunity for, especially in the setting up and designing funds. I think that seems to be the work that's calling the most at the moment, even from Inspiral. Like, I sat in a room with Joshua and Dan a couple of days ago and wrote the financial agreement. And that's like basically laying the groundwork for then being able to formally have different ways that we can do collaborative funding and do different sort of funds in the community. And then the next really obvious wave is like getting all the Inspiral venture stuff sorted into some sort of collaborative fund thing. And that was the conversation that digital storytellers want to be part of. And then the thing that Andrew was talking about is similar, but for EHF. And it's like, where is that where is that knowledge coming from? And I think we have it, and if we wanted to choose to claim it, then people would come to us for it, like how to design those funds. So I'm in two minds, but the legal framework, the worker owned stuff, doing some pre-work so that in Feb we can step into it together and go, this makes a total bunch of sense, let's do it. And it might be that I'm not doing much consulting or anything at all, and that's fine.
I mean, I think that, this, like bringing some of these strands together around the Leadwise impulse and the idea of, Leadwise becomes a New Zealand limited liability company that is like a subsidiary company, shrubbery in the Greater Than Garden. And I would love for us to be getting legal advice on how we do that as well, whether we need legal advice to do that. But I think that feels like it would solve your need, Ants, and also would start to serve that need that I have of feeling anxious about my all of my work going through a UK company, which I'm still not sure how I feel about that. Like, perfectly happy for all of the consulting work, and once we get the consensus contract flipped over to Greater Than, for all of that to be going through the Greater Than core machine. But how it would feel then to have the product-based company, Leadwise, based in New Zealand feels good to me. But then we need to figure out how that relates both legally and financially to the Greater Than core.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Like, I think that we sort of skipped. I don't know if we brought Ants into this thought process. So like, I'm not sure if that's exactly where we should jump right away, because that feels to me it's a little bit further down.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to say, Ants, that I think that like, yeah, right now most of the work is consulting, and I think that it's really, really important. I mean, as we've talked about, that we also have our eye on the ball in terms of products, and like that's why I really, really want you to be part of this, because of your focus being more on that. Because I'm just not interested in just building a consulting company. So I think that it's really, like, to me, that is one of the key tensions that we're going to be holding, because I've at least always walked into this with sort of that double ambition, which, most people say you have to pick, but it's impossible. But somehow I think that there's a huge, like, benefit to be gained out of being able to hold them both and building on those synergies. So that's sort of a challenge that I really want to take on, to be honest.
I think we can do it. I agree. I think most businesses that are successful start with one and move to the other and hold both in some way or shape or form. Like, even Consensus has a services offering, But I would just add, like, I'm not a lawyer, and I just don't want to spend a whole bunch of time reinventing the wheel, because I think the thing that feels really obvious to me, just to go back to it, is like, even if I put where am I going to put my energy next year hat on? And obviously I want to work with you guys, and obviously I want to build products. I still haven't been able to figure out anything else other than, like, if you want to build a product, how are you going to fund it? There's like three ways. You can consult strap it, you can get people to work on it for free until the money comes later, or you can take outside investment and have a funded runway to build the products and launch them. And I think the right answer might be a mix of all three of those. But from a structural perspective, I'm just leaning towards use what works and do it better, rather than reinvent something wholly new. So I think my bias is probably more like, let's get GT Core up and running really well in the UK as the home base, and use that as the outward facing brand that wins the consulting work and, like, gets seen in the world, that do the stuff and attracts really good people. And we build out some systems to support a whole lot of really good stuff to happen in the garden. And then let's build different structures as needed. And so Leadwise Limited as a company that has a structure that is clearly linked and has a financial flow back through greater than, and leverages it.
So actually what we were talking about was actually shrubberies as 100% owned by greater than, or no, majority owned. That was a potential concept that we were exploring.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, I don't know if it makes sense to roll out the whole thought process we went through of like the pros and cons. But yeah, I definitely think like when I briefly explained this idea of, a shrubbery could be like, yeah, either majority owned by greater than, or just be, a thing that like is inside greater than and has agreements or whatever. Like, yeah, I think that like Manel specifically was a bit like his alarm bells went off a bit, because I think he's he's managed some companies where they had many different subsidiaries, and it became quite a nightmare of managing different P&Ls, and like can be quite horrible. So I guess like, yeah, I was really keen to explore more consensus actually as a benchmark. That's why I was asking Susan about this, because I think that in consensus, the spoke mesh model, conceptually, that's sort of what we're going for. And like my understanding is that, yeah, sometimes they're owned by consensus, they're inside it, sometimes they're separate entities. So understanding like how can we have as little red tape as possible, and have a similar type of ecosystem, because I think actually it's like we want to do a consensus structure but better.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that for me, it makes sense to think about that in terms of, so if the four of us are the GT4, and we as a collective each own 1/4 of the 51% of Leadwise, Ants, you and I probably own more of that relatively, but then ring fencing some of that ownership for product owners or whoever else might be not in the greater than core, but could also be an owner of the Leadwise company.
Yeah. So that's just a normal group structure.
Yeah.
And I'd be up for that. I think I'd probably back out or be very much less motivated by trying to do something more complicated than that. Just because like I just don't have the bandwidth to do another 3 to 5 years of really going all in on a company that has a messy structure where I know that there's not a clear legal way to get either outside investment in or realize the asset in some capacity in the future without it being like a super complicated process.
Yeah.
And in 18 months, if Leadwise is in trouble for some reason, and we need to pull in some outside investment, we need to be able to do that really quickly and not have to like create a new structure at that point. So if you look at like just even what's happened with EDA and Lumio and like where the rubber has really hit the road and where they've really had to like make shit happen, there's someone in the team that has to manage the P&L and do that stuff. And I don't think that it should be centralized inside greater than all the time. I think our challenge will be making sure that we feel like all of our companies are all part of the same mesh or the same garden, and it's not like I deep dive on Leadwise and forget about the garden. But that's a cultural thing, not a structural thing.
Yeah.
Well, that was actually exactly what we were talking about. Is that like how if these shrubberies are independent companies, I do, even if we really work on the culture, have quite the skepticism as how you could avoid that. That people aren't just thinking about their company and what that needs to do and aren't incentivized more on the whole.
Well, I think that for me, because it's going to be, at least for next year, even though my intentionality might be will be drawn to building out Leadwise as a thing, most of my actual practical work will continue to be with consensus. So I think that, from my perspective, that's a very, very low risk.
But I'm thinking more about like other people coming in, because like think about, this is exactly what's happening in consensus, right? People join Spoke and they feel like they're part of the Spoke. Do some people feel part of consensus? It depends. How do you achieve that they feel like they're part of greater than, not that they're part of just their little thing? Because if they're also a worker owner, and then we need to distribute surplus, that they might decide to put money into a different part of the organization and not their own because they think it makes more sense. I think that's a really good example to me.
But I agree with Ance. I think it's a culture thing. It's like inviting people in that we are convinced collectively will hold that perspective.
It's also like, I actually don't see necessarily anything wrong with people deep diving and focusing to build out a thing. Like, I remember there's an Inspiral meeting way back where Rob checked in and was like, I feel really guilty because I'm building Lumio, not building Inspiral. Or all of my focus is going into Lumio because it needs it right now. And I think we're kidding ourselves if we think we can build companies without having that sort of focus.
Yeah, what I'm talking about though is not the focus, because focus is great, but about the like interest, like that you're thinking about, like in terms of which position you're taking when you think about decisions and like who you're looking out for most, right? And of course, it's always going to be a balance. But I just also think
also the intent, right? Like if we say if we try this on, let's say we've got a really long-term intent with growing the garden, and it's like a 10 to 15 to 20 year intent, and like we can really see it thriving and being like this awesome co-ownership model, and it has lots of shrubberies and some of them have been successful. Inside that long-term context, if we say, all right, we're going to build a team that greater than owns a third of it, a founding team or like a focus core team is going to own a third of it, and we're going to have a third of it remaining for bringing in new people and outside investment. And our aim is to grow this thing and sell it in 5 years, and sell it for between $10 and $15 million. And we all sell the shrubbery. So we decide we're going to build a business, and it's got a structure and it's got a plan, and we just say we're going to give this a crack, and it's got a mix of risk. And then we can have a conversation with an investor that says, okay, I'll put in $200,000 and I'll be with you for 3 to 5 years and we'll do this thing. We build it out and we sell it. Like that has a very, very different intent, because then we know where the capital is flowing back to. It's flowing back to a third of it to the core, a third of it to the founding team who'll probably reinvest it in the core or in their next thing, and a third of it back to whoever was involved. And we'll build something interesting along the way. Like I'm really drawn to a strategy that's that, I guess, clear and direct, but to me that's a yes and, because it still also holds the consciousness of the bigger picture of the garden, and like basically like building fertilizer inside it to supercharge the next thing. But let's not discount that sort of thing from happening by wiring a structure where we can't do that. But that's really different potential. So, that could be Leadwise if we wanted it to be, or it could be not if we didn't want it to be.
So, I mean, I think that there's one really key conversation here, which is about the intention of selling something. And I mean, I think I don't know how much sense it makes to have it just like conceptually and more specific to actual things. But like, for instance, I have a really hard time imagining how Leadwise is something that one would aim to sell in terms of the nature of that like product and platform. But yeah, I'm really like, I mean, we've had this conversation before, I think, and like I feel quite strongly about the selling objective, and I have very few examples of like selling ever leading to value that was created being sustained versus just destroyed afterwards. So like, to me, that like, I think that the question of how can we fund building valuable products, that's the question. How can we get the money we need to build them, but not how can we build something that we can sell? Like that's not a way of going into this that I feel comfortable with. So I think that like, yeah, understanding better, like I would need to fully understand why is it that we're trying to sell something? What is the objective of this, and how is that useful for us to say that that's something that we want to do in a certain case?
For sure. Yeah.
Susan, because we chatted about this a little bit in Barcelona, but I guess are you a bit?
I mean, I feel like we shouldn't close off any possibilities, but I also agree that I am not I can follow Ants. I can follow your rationale about making things investable. I think that going in, and I've seen this a lot, and I'm sure you have as well with startups, going in and starting something and aligning it to this core North Star of being able to sell it in 2 years will absolutely create a different tension and dynamic in building something. I'm not sure that I'm up for that tension. What I'm up for is building something with impact and quality. And if over the course of the time we find that that's attracting the interest of people or entities with fuck tons of money that want to partner with us or pay us for it, that's completely different mindset than coming into it, building it in order to sell it. That would be my perspective.
Yeah, I'm totally on board with that. I think what I was trying to do was articulate like a very, very clear direction. Like I also think Leadwise is the wrong shaped business to put on a exit from day one strategy. But I do think that there is a version where if we got it spinning up, that there would be absolutely a chance for having someone, organization buy into it and put capital in and restructure it and the people who built it do well. I'm not afraid of capitalism in that sense, because I also see it like if we build out core infrastructure and get it from 0 to 3, and we are absolutely not the organization to take it from 3 to 7, but someone else is, then we should sell it to them. Like that to me feels important, but it would depend 100% on what that is. So with Leadwise as an example, I see it as like, based on the conversation we had last night, Susan, it's like maybe 20 trainers who like we all know and love and trust, or like think are pretty cool. They're not in our core community, but they're like doing online stuff, they're delivering stuff. There's a really good, strong curriculum. There's a nice like IP wrap around that with a brand and a whole lot of B2B partnerships. That's a really good business. We could create a spreadsheet where we're just on my to-do list and I haven't done yet. And Fran, I'm totally like supposed to be held to account and I haven't done it. So, but like we could create a spreadsheet where that makes good financial sense and it's a business model that we can build over the next, 6, 18, 24 months. And it's totally like an important part of the garden. But that's not necessarily the thing that we want to build to sell. But all I want to do is make sure that we're going in with that level of clarity of intent, because otherwise we just fucking waste our time. And I don't want to do that next year. Definitely want to build something with like clear intent and that we can do well from.
Yeah, and I think that like it is our best bet to just be really concrete and actually, I think that it's like one shrubbery at a time, choose the right model. So if we have Leadwise right now, do as much as we can, is just like create a greater than and Leadwise framework that works and be clear on those intentions and our general values. And then if a new one comes in, we say, okay, what type of a thing is this? What do we think that needs? And then we can come up with the right structure. To me, that seems the easiest.
Yeah, 100%.
And the main thing is just like, I want to be clear on, so I totally hear you, Susan, on the bank account thing. Like that's definitely, I get that it's not great to have a UK bank account for this kind of a setup. But what stops us from not creating another company, but having agreements on revenue sharing instead of ownership, if we're saying, well, we're not pushing out Leadwise to sell it right now, and using existing structures to invoice, or just creating, agreements between the different like structures, or like, the shrubberies and the core, without having to, add more paperwork. You're muted.
I would be open to that if I could see it, right? If it was clear to me, right? But I mean, even thinking about some of the other things that we're talking about, like getting Optimi to help. So using, having some sort of a conjoined zero account between greater than and Leadwise, but the Leadwise stuff being invoiced and monitored or measured in New Zealand dollars. And so I think that there's ways to do it. And I'm open to that. But I just need to see it practically on paper before I can have an opinion.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So we sort of jumped right into the discussion. We didn't actually do that because I had a few more updates. I don't know if we should zoom out and do those, or should we, how do we want to conclude on this bit?
I think practical is really good. I think that's where it got to. It was like basically, it feels like we've had sort of had the discussion a few times, and it's like, let's just get to the super practicals. And the live ones we have right now, like I just wrote down some actions, is for lead-wise for me over the next week. Maybe it's by February. So I could put a timeline alongside you, Fran, for the core, which is like get a spreadsheet together, get a business, basically a business and investment case together, so I can put whatever, can put a proposal forward so that Susan and Kate can sign it or like look at it and go, yes. And we can actually greater than structuralize lead-wise moving forward. And I know there's a convo with JV in there as well, around ownership and operational and blah, blah, blah. So it's like, I feel like by February, I could probably commit to that as a chunk of work that I could invest in, as in don't need to be paid for and can drive, because it's like due diligence. And then if there's any others, let's just treat it as like super practical rather than abstract process stuff.
Right, but so I think though that the same way as the like greater than structural work needs to be accounted for, well, that also does. But is it an investment in lead-wise, and that will reflect itself in like your like return, what you can get as a return / ownership, or?
Yeah, and it's due diligence. It's my own due diligence for the year too. Like I'm putting the time and thinking in to go, really, do I want to build this with these people? Is like this the right structure? Are we just going to flame this out? Or like, do I really believe in this?
Sure. But the thing is, like, just, this due diligence will benefit the others on the team working on it too. That's the point.
Yeah, absolutely. And then it's a template and a process that we can like use for the garden afterwards as well. 100%.
Okay. So basically you're saying by Feb, that seems realistic.
Well, I was hoping to do it much sooner, but I think...
I know, I wrote in my thing next week, like this, to check in with you this week.
Well, New Frontiers happened, and the book happened.
Okay.
So, but if you're aiming for Feb as something that's like a draft proposal we can step into, I could probably align a timeline around that and commit to it. That's like a draft proposal that we could step into, and then there's a whole lot of pre-work and conversations to have. I don't know, Susan, does that feel unreasonable or slow or?
I mean, I think it feels practical, right? I mean, I think that we've got plenty of work to be getting on with, but I also think that I really want to validate and support Fran to do any of the work that she has time for between now and then, to come in February with some really solid, well thought out proposals that we can press go on then, because what would feel shitty to me is if we get to February and we're still just talking. I really want to get to February and have that time together somewhere on a beach, where we can make some real decisions about next steps for all of us. That's what would feel good for me.
Yeah, I think that sounds good to me. And so, yeah, I think that Ance's ballpark of 6 to 10K makes sense. I think that for me, what would make sense is to say, like, to agree on what the rate is that we're going to pay the work for. And like, I think the ballpark of that is about correct. And I mean, I'm just tracking my hours. And if it takes me less time, then, that's just what we'll budget. I'm happy to do it that way.
It's also your due diligence as someone setting it up, because you'll get a financial flow back through greater than as an owner in the future too, right?
Yeah, but all the other owners will too. That's the whole point. Like, that's the same thing I'm saying with lead-wise, right? Like, if the work is shared between everyone equally, sure, then it's fine because everyone's an equal owner. But if one person's doing the work and everyone is benefiting from that afterwards, you can't, right? So I think that's the important balance that one needs to find.
Yeah.
And
maybe
I'm just
put a 2x on it or something. Or I don't know. Just think about what would feel good for you.
Well, I mean, I talked about it a bit with Susan and Kate, and I just think that we should put it in the operating budget for the next 12 months, like basically just include a setup cost. And I think that with the funds coming in from Consensus and DAO Stack and the stuff that's coming, like that we can definitely afford that. So to me, that seems like, actually, like, I don't think we need to put this into the future. That's what I'm saying, is that we have well-paying consulting gigs coming in. So I think that we can actually absolutely afford to pay those of us who are not just fully working on those to do the other work in the meantime. And I think that's, to me, also a little bit of this, like, you know, this is maybe just currently opportunistic about, you know, having a consensus and like that being an interesting development, that how much we can really use that to fund other work that's related, like that's actually, you know, cross-funded because we're selling them the exact same thing, versus also really well paid, gives us a good margin. And I do think that like that is a relevant case for getting a good amount of funds to have people work on stuff. And, you know, startups raise way too much money for what they need half the time, and they just, you know, blow it all. So I've seen what people can do with very little money, and I think it's not negligible.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure.
So yeah, I guess, well, Susan, what do you think I should do in terms of like, do you agree with sort of that idea that we say, well, we don't really need to postpone paying for this work, but like that we can put that into the operating budget of the next 12 months? Or do you think it should be more of a like we pay it off in the future based on what happens kind of a thing?
I mean, I think that I just like any of this stuff what we talked about before, which is 50% upfront and 50% at abundance time, feels really good to me.
Yeah, you're right. We didn't mention that yet.
So
I think that's a good idea.
Do you want to tell Ants what we were thinking there?
Well, basically the idea was to say that we pay this type of work upfront, like at a 50% discounted rate to like the regular or more regular rates that we would have, and that then in the future, if we reach certain targets and we have funds, that then we pay back, like we add on, we double them basically.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, I think on some level it's like, Fran, you've been investing in this, dragging this greater than thing along for a couple of years already, and it just feels like another bit of stuff to do to drag it along to get it to the next point. So maybe it feels a little bit different, but I mean, you've invested
What are you
so.
trying to say by that?
Well, it's like, you know, it's been your startup for much longer than it's been felt like, you know, Susan and I are circling around it as our startup or joining it. So it's like another chunk of work you've got to do or you're doing, and you're the person to do the work. That's like risk time or something. But this one just feels a little bit more concrete because there's real money coming through the pipes with consulting work. You know, if you think about like,
I think really what's important to me, there's a key difference now than, let's say, 1 year ago, where there was 4 of us with Juliana, is that we were all equally spending non-paid time on the thing. And right now, that's not the case at all. Yeah. And I think that's, to me, the main difference. That it has nothing to do with how long I've been investing, because, yeah, for sure that's the case, and that's another conversation. But to me, it's about that balance.
Yeah, so
the idea we're equal.
Yeah. Yeah, because you've got more risk, and it's like you're just doing a bunch of free work while a bunch of high-paid consultants go and get billable hours.
Yeah, and that, like, you know, I actively said I'm not going to jump fully into the consensus stuff because I think it's better for greater than the organization to do this work and make sure that we actually have something to like move forward on in a few months. Yeah. If I were just in this for myself, and like making the most money in the short term, yeah, I would just jump into like doing as much delivery as possible.
Yeah, and for me, it's like this is what I want to be spending the consensus abundance on. I want to be paying Fran to do this groundwork. I want to be paying you, Ants, to do the Leadwise groundwork. This is, you know, for once in our lives, we've got a bit of money to invest in the work, and that's what I want. That's what I want to be spending the money on. But I also recognize that it's, you know, it's a tension that I hold all the time, is like, it's not my money. I mean, it's my money in my name and it's sitting in my bank account. But I've opted into a collaboration with 3 other people where it's not just my decision about what to do with this abundance.
I mean, this is the part where I don't know why it's so hard for us to, like, why can't we just put a number aside? Like, Fran, you said a day a week, and for approximately 12 weeks, like, just multiply that number of hours by an hourly rate that feels good, and then you get a number. Like, can't we just do that?
I mean, that feels good to me, but but there has been some resistance from Kate, which I don't quite understand. Well, I do understand. So Kate's, and maybe she'll be listening to this, Kate's perspective is that there are many kinds of work, right? So Fran's doing the actual logistical work of setting up bank accounts and talking to lawyers and thinking about structures. Kate is doing the more esoteric, potentially, work of ambassadoring and building relationships and building the market, the market visibility of this. And so that's her argument, is that that's also valuable work. And I think that she's right. But I guess collectively we need to decide, are those of equal value?
Yeah, I mean, I'm doing work as well. It just
me too. I mean, for fuck's sake, right? We all are.
But I think this is the rigor around saying, well, here's a business case. Like, I could put a proposal forward and say, I'll do a deep dive business case due diligence process on Leadwise and present something by Feb, and it's going to cost you 10 grand. Do you want it or not? And if you say no, then I won't do it. And the same way Fran could say, well, I'm going to do a chunk of work to operationalize consulting. It's going to cost you this much money, or this is how much time it's going to take. We need to resource it. And the alternative to that is that you continue doing a spaghetti mess that'll fuck you later down the line, or you'll spend way more of your delivery time coordinating yourselves and figuring shit out. And we just have those, like, transparent, rigorous conversations about value. And if Kate says, well, I want 2 grand a month to go and talk to people, we can say yes or no. I think
that's a really good approach, actually, which is that, like, there needs to just be a concrete proposal, right? Because I think that, like, we're all doing these conversations and thinking, and it's a bit hard to measure. But I think that, like, it's impossible to pay for something unless you somehow verbalize a bit more clearly what it is. And I think that Kate could do that if she wanted to. And that's totally something that we could think. Like, I think that we should absolutely figure out how to, measure other types of value. So I think that it's a matter of making some kind of more concrete proposal around, like what Ance was just saying, a few months of talking to people. Or I don't know exactly how one would formulate it, but I think that without that we can't actually budget it.
I mean, I personally think that that's ownership overhead, right? And that's something that we're all expected to do for our shares.
Yes, exactly. But so I think there's the assumed basic ownership overhead that we agree we're all doing. But then it's like, my sense from Kate was that she feels like somehow she's doing more than that, that she hasn't quite been able to articulate what that is. And that somehow, for her to not feel so frustrated, somehow we need to help her articulate it to figure out, okay, like, should she do more of this or not? Or, because it reminds me a little bit of Open State, that they actually did this switch that led to a huge crisis, which where they were trying for each person to basically get funds from others, like via co-budgets, to do work that was not delivery work. And some people, it turned out, were doing things that everyone thought was really important, and they were getting lots of money for their work. And other people, it turned out, others thought was not at all important. And so that, like, articulation led to, like, a pretty big drama internally. But I think that, we're often just running ahead and doing, oh, I think this is important, I think that is important, I'm just doing it. But we actually need to, like, sense check together, what is the actual investment, and does it make sense for us to make it? So I think, but so
between now,
I don't know.
Between now and Feb, is it fair to say there is one there's two clear active projects that are not consulting work that are going on in the Leadwise, in the Greater Than Garden. One is the consulting core work setup, like, or whatever you want to call that, core garden bed setup that you're doing, Fran, that you're gonna basically have a scope of work and push by Feb. And then another chunk of another project is the Leadwise restructure and diligence.
Yep. And I'd like to fund both of those, whether I'm funding it from my private equity or we're funding it from consensus abundance.
And so on top of those two projects, there is also general founder ownership overhead that we all do and we all hold in our own invisible ways. And as a core, we're like trying to create more consciousness about that and support each other with that and figure out what that looks like. Yeah. And I think that should be an ongoing part of being part of this community forever. And that's just what it takes to be on the shareholding books and be a director and blah, blah, blah. I think that's just how business works. It's, but yeah, if we just have clarity on those two individual projects, I think that'll help us a lot.
You're muted, Fran.
Yeah. So do you think, Susan, that we should somehow, like, could one of us maybe have a chat with Kate to talk through, to maybe help her articulate more clearly what it is that she feels like she's doing that's costing her a lot of energy that we need to somehow account for better?
I mean, maybe
because I'm not quite sure we're going to fully meet that need with this plan, or like, is there a third project or not? And like, can we clearly say no, there isn't, or like, I think we need to somehow address this concern, basically.
Yeah, cool. I can have a chat with her.
Great. That sounds good.
I think her watching this video will also be some good context. And I mean, another chunk of this that's really hard, and I've never seen it done really that well, is how you account for business development time and what people perceive as business development time. It's just, it's dark art, and it's really hard. And Spiral have tried how many different models to do this collectively, and everyone tries so many different models to do this.
Yeah, and we had some chats in Barcelona about that like, I think it's even harder if you're working in an ecosystem. And like, how many of these sort of random calls do we do with people where we don't know, is it going to be a lead for this network or that group or this project? We don't know. And it's only in the process that you then figure that out. So it's just, you don't know who you're working for, basically. We're business developers of our ecosystems, basically. And we send leads wherever it fits best,
I mean, that's
a whole other level of the question.
Yeah, and I think that unlike most other groups or configurations that I've been part of, we all have that skill, and that's our kind of our way of being in the world anyway. Which I don't know if that makes it more complicated or easier. And if that assumption is, I like to think of it as role zero. That's what Percolab calls those kind of shareholder specific roles that everybody does. So a role zero role is, just to be focused on ongoing business development. And I guess moving forward, though, where it might get complicated is if we're all doing that kind of work and the person who happens to get the contract signed on the dotted line, do they get the business development fee, or do we just decide that, if part of our role zero is collectively to do ambassadoring, brand awareness, business development, and that there's no extra, remuneration for who actually gets the contract signed. I don't know that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and I think something that we just need to be like hyper aware of, because like in the case of consensus, I mean, you did freaking like 2 months of work. You know what I mean? Like, it was clear that you deserved the biz dev fee because there was so much work. But I think the sort of, if we all have certain relationships, that's when it's going to get, difficult. And I'm not sure we can like pay for a lead in our own team, because it seems to me, especially the leads, it's the closing of the sale, which, really usually almost always requires a good chunk of work, because you just need to like go through all the hoops.
Mm.
But
Yeah.
I mean, I think being aware of it is what's most important, because like we should probably go through when it's a specific case. Hashtag practical, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking adding complexity and opportunity to that is the book project. Like Susan and I, we've been so busy getting the bloody thing done that now as we turn our attention to how we promote that and resource the selling of that and route the leads and understand the value that it creates or could create if we are smart about it, you know, we have a potential huge sales engine and network there to really pull some abundance, but we haven't got the wiring in behind that yet. And I don't know what it looks like, and someone's got to do that thinking too.
Yeah, for sure. Wait a sec. I feel like there was one thought there still. I can't remember. Oh yeah, right. One important, totally, just last important thought is that I think, yes, we are all that sort of personality that's doing that kind of biz devy work, of like talking to people, opening, closing, whatever. And that we do need to be super aware of that, you know, in the future, I definitely, you know, there need to be people part of this that are not like that. And it's going to be more diverse. And that therefore we do need to somehow differentiate, or I've often made the huge mistake in the past of expecting everyone to be able to do this. And that's just not the case. And it's also not a good use of people's time, right? And that like we need to make space for different personalities that don't just do this type of overhead, maybe do something else.
Yeah, I agree. But are they going to be part of the core? But yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Like from my perspective, yeah, you can't just have biz devy salespeople in the core. That's not my criteria, at least for this at all. Like I think it has much more to do with commitment and level of engagement and responsibility.
Yeah,
I think there's many ways to have commitment and responsibility. So I think it's like, I don't know, I really want to draw awareness to like not skewing how we see value by the type of value we provide.
but then with that argument, it's like that for me is it even more of a argument or validation that there shouldn't be a biz dev fee, because if people are contributing in a way that's not biz dev-y, then they'll never have the opportunity to actually win a biz dev fee, for example.
It's like front of house, back of house tips in hospo, you know?
Yeah, totally.
But I think case by case.
Fees. Sorry, oops. I think there's a question of biz dev fees if you're a co-owner in a way, because are you incentivized enough as a co-owner to bring on business? You should be, right? I think it's actually more about the periphery that you want to incentivize to bring in stuff where the fees are really important.
Yeah.
But I would say let's continue that conversation because there's a lot more meat there, but probably not now.
Have you got those key updates that we wanted to move into? That's what I was going to ask before.
Yeah, because I'd love to finish a little early if we can, because I need to get into town.
Okay, I'm going to run you through speedy. So you guys have both received email addresses, greaterthan.works. You should have received an email.
When?
I mean, I sent you an email to it, and I don't know if you received the email, but it's an alias for now.
I got it. I freaked out. I was like, oh my God, I don't want another email. But yep, I got it.
No, I didn't get one, friend.
Huh. Well, if Anne's got it, that's weird if you didn't. Because I did not get a bounce. So, well, I guess. So part of this update is that based on a quick conversation I had with Kate and Susan, I basically brought in Malcolm on setting up this stuff because I was trying to change our primary Google domain to greaterthan.works, and it was really difficult. And I was like, shit, I'm not going to go any further. So basically, with that preliminary agreement, I just went forward and told them that basically we want to start looping them into more of the greater than ops. And so basically, I mean, for now, we haven't negotiated any like specific amount of hours or anything. I just basically asked them with this domain set up and the emails to get that set up. And, you know, since we have a working relationship anyway, assuming they'll just tell us the hours and then we'll figure that out. Basically, that's definitely going in the budget in terms of calculating support on all the admin stuff. but basically my suggestion is that I'm just going to focus on like supporting them on the different stuff we need. And, obviously that takes some time on my part, but really bringing them in as much as possible so that we have that like running and humming. Are there any comments or thoughts on that? It seems like a very good time investment to me. And like, I'm already working with Malcolm on EHF and everything. So like, it's really easy.
Yeah.
Great. So basically there's soon going to be our like reference for these kind of questions. So basically we're going to soon shift to the main domain being .works. We just need to like still change those settings. But basically the idea is we're going to completely get rid of .finance because it's quite expensive. And so, we'll finish the year of payment or whatever, and then really like cancel all of those. So the website's been changed. Yeah, the emails, we'll look into that, Susan. And the other thing I just wanted to mention is that, so our Twitter account was Greater Finance, which, I never really liked anyway. And basically I was looking around for what else there is, and there's really almost nothing with greater than. So my current proposal, I put in the comms channel, that we do need to once again thank Manel for that idea, which I thought was pretty good, is a greater than with, instead of an A, it's an X at the end in the then. If anyone has alternative proposals that actually are available on Twitter, please let me know. But this is that for now. Okay, moving on. So
Was greater than works taken? Or was it too long?
It's too long. Twitter's changed its length. It seems like you couldn't. It was too long. And the thing is, what's good about this is if you type in greater TH, then it pops up already. So it's way better than what we had before, even. Greater, yeah, we checked that one, Susan.
Okay.
Greater than. And I think that wasn't available and you needed to add something to the end of it. But in any case, okay. I'm happy to take any proposals, but please just check on Twitter before you send me the proposal, because I've already done this for too long. And
okay, cool.
Just, you can just go through and look if you have other ideas. But basically, yeah. So the other update is just the bank. Yay, we have online banking. Hallelujah. Manel sat at the bank today until they finally gave it to him. But when he comes here on Thursday, I'll actually have the like security thing to log in. And basically, though, I haven't been able to sync the Xero bank feeds yet because that didn't work, and I had to write to Xero support to help me with it because somehow that didn't quite work. But that's just the update that we've almost got that, thankfully. And yeah, I think that's all the admin stuff. I'm going to write to the lawyer. Greater than works. I think that's too many difficult. Okay, we'll discuss on Slack, Ants. But I think that the shorter the better. I mean, with Twitter handles, right? Like, you're more likely to be mentioned, etc. And I just had one question about the book for printing. So if the books are being printed in Germany, like, where are they being shipped? Are they being shipped to New Zealand from Germany? And could we not?
Individually shipped.
Ah, right. Okay, the printer ships them to where people are.
Correct.
Cool. Okay, great. Yeah, I was somehow imagining like they're going to ship them all to New Zealand, and then from New Zealand you'll be shipping them around the world. That wouldn't have made a lot of sense.
No, so Heftwork is a co-op between a printer and a distributor. So the printer prints them in Berlin, and then the distribution warehouse is just out of Berlin, and then they ship globally from there. So actually it's like worse for New Zealand because it's like 5 to 10 days for European shipping, about 15 days for US shipping, and between 2 to 4 weeks for the rest of the world. So it's like not ideal, but I guess a lot of our market is EU, US anyway. And then as we go with print on demand options and stuff in the future, that will change. But like that's all we got for now. It's like, but it's fully independent and we control it. It's just going to take, it's a little bit of a pain in the ass.
Okay. Cool. Well, that's all I got.
Those all seem really good. Um, I really want you to just be confident with a number, Fran, that feels good for all of this work. Like, I think just push yourself and just say, fuck it, it's worth this much money. And like, we need to recognize it. Because otherwise, it's like, that's an act of leadership in itself, I think. My feedback would be like, just to reinforce that.
Okay, thanks. I'll think on that. And so we're good for this slot, right? For the future, next week, etc.
Oh,
And I guess the only other, yeah.
Next week I can't do, and the week after I can't do. So I'm out for 2 weeks at this slot. And I know that's a giant pain in the ass, but I feel like I'm really clear on the long-term arc of stuff over the summer, and I'm just going to keep doubling down on trying to solve this lead-wise stuff, and I just can't make the next 2 meetings.
Cool.
Can we, yeah, I mean, if I'm in the US next week at the offsite, I could do a shorter, this is at lunchtime, so it's on the West Coast, this is 12 to 1:30 next week. I could probably do a portion of it, but maybe not the whole thing. So
okay. Well, we could just do like a 30 minutes or a 45 minutes.
Yeah. So when I get the agenda for the offsite, then I can let you know which half hour in this time.
Okay.
But then moving forward, this time works perfect for me.
Okay, great. That seems good. Awesome.
All right. Thanks, team.
Yeah. Thank you. I was going to say sleep well, but that's me. Okay. Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.
Fran, do you want to have a quick chat about the Andrew Hoppin convo?
Oh, sure.
10 minutes.
Yeah, hold on. Let me just stop recording and then I'll leave you two.
Yes.
Yeah, hold on.
Oh, yeah, and Susan, if you can just share the recording